Ladies and gentlemen, I think that everybody that pursues the path to self-employment is forced to change how they view and manage their money. Because when you become self-employed, you lose all the benefits that come with being an employee to a company. You lose your health insurance, you lose your retirement match, your sick days, your guidance, your company taking out your taxes. And probably the biggest thing you lose is that predictable paycheck. When you decide to abandon ship and become self-employed, you enter this very uncertain world with no guidance, and you're forced to come up with a plan and be more organized financially. In order to survive this lifestyle, you have to manage your money a little bit differently. And so in this video, I want to talk about how I've navigated this world of self-employment in this last year and a half. And I want to talk about the 5 steps that I've taken to manage my money in this less certain world. And regardless of whether or not you want to be self-employed, I think that seeing how I manage my money in uncertainty can help how you manage your money. So whenever you decide to become self-employed, the first step you need to take is accept that your income is no longer predictable and embrace it. All right. Normally, when you work for a company, you have a steady paycheck that is the same amount each pay period. And having that predictable paycheck allows you to create a budget, set aside a specific amount of money to save, and plan for the future. When you know how much money you're going to make each paycheck, big or small, you can plan your life around that amount. But the first challenge that you come into when you're self-employed is no longer having this predictable paycheck. And planning and preparing becomes a lot harder. When you no longer have the predictable paycheck, you enter this very uncertain world where you can't base your life off an amount of money anymore, and it's very scary. I mean, since I've started this journey, my lowest paying month was October 2022, where I made $1,003. Which is more money than most people make on YouTube. But that's not enough money to pay my bills. And when you become self-employed, you have to accept the fact that your income is going to be variable. There's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. That's just the nature of this lifestyle. And although you need to accept the fact that your income is variable, you should also embrace it. Because when you're an employee of a company, your income is capped at your salary. But when you're self-employed, your income has no limit. There's no limit to how much money you can make, which is a very exciting thing. I mean, my highest earning month since being self-employed was actually last month, where I made $6,500, which is more money than I was making at my past job. And so the first step to managing your money as a self-employed person is accepting the fact that you no longer have a predictable paycheck, but also embracing it because your income is no longer capped. And if you put in the work, you can earn a lot more. And once you accept that fact, then you can move on to step 2, control your spending and make it predictable. Now, as I said, when you're self-employed, you don't have tons of control over your income. However, you do have a decent amount of control over your spending. And this is your superpower as a self-employed person, because when you know how much money you spend each month, you know the minimum amount you need to make ends meet and how long your savings will go if needed. And if you make your spending predictable and have a general idea of how much money you're spending each month, you can bring some certainty back in your life. For example, before I quit my job, I tracked my spending patterns for multiple months and noticed my spending averaged out to $2,500 a month, which are pretty low expenses. And I knew that was a very realistic amount to make on my own each month. But also, before I quit my job, I had $80,000 saved up, which if my monthly spending is $2,500, that's 2.5 years of living expenses. So when I quit my job, I felt pretty secure that even if I wasn't making that much money, I could sustain this quality of life pretty easy. And whether you're self-employed or an employee to a company, I think it's very important to make your spending predictable. Because when it's predictable, you know how much money you need to sustain your lifestyle. you bring some certainty back in your life. And managing money becomes a little bit more possible because although you can't base your life off this predictable paycheck amount, you can base your life off how much money you're spending. And when you control it, you know how much money you need to make and how far the money you have is going to go, which brings a lot more sanity back in your life. Now, before I move on to this next step, I just want to take a quick moment to talk about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. Now, being self-employed is amazing. You get to do whatever you want, whenever you want. However, we often don't talk about the other side of this lifestyle. According to Forbes, entrepreneurs are 2 times more likely to suffer from depression, 6 times more likely to have ADHD, 3 times more likely to struggle with addiction, and 11 times more likely to receive a bipolar diagnosis. I can testify myself that I've had many emotional breakdowns doing this. I mean, the amount of pressure doing this is immense, and something that's helped me deal with this pressure is therapy. And BetterHelp is an online therapy platform ready to help you with whatever your needs may be, at a time that works for you in the comfort of your own home. And since it's all online, you're not just bound to the therapist in your area, but BetterHelp has a network of over 30,000 licensed therapists. To get started, all you need to do is click on the link in my description, betterhelp.com/AustinWilliams, answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you with a perfect licensed therapist for your needs. And once you get matched, you can communicate with them through various forms of communication, whether that's call, text, or video chat. And for whatever reason, if your therapist isn't a good match, which is something that is common, you can always switch at any time at no extra cost. But throughout this experience of being self-employed, I've definitely learned the importance of taking care of your mental health. And if you don't take care of it, it's really hard to do other things. So if you're struggling in life, consider therapy with BetterHelp. To get started and get matched with a licensed therapist, as well as get 10% off your first month, click on the link in my description, betterhelp.com/AustinWilliams, and thank you BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. All right, so once you control your spending and make it predictable, then we can move on to the third step, live the same regardless of how much you make. Now, as I said earlier, and this is just me being transparent with you, my lowest earning month was $1,003, and my highest earning month was $6,500. And let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, it is so nice to finally be able to save again after a year and a half of barely breaking even. YouTube is not an easy industry to succeed in. It is an emotional roller coaster, and I'm sure me explaining how much money I make is going to get a lot of hate in the comments. But that's the nature of this business too. Anyways, that is a big spread in my income, about $5,500 difference. And I think a huge problem that people run into as they start to make more money is that they start to spend more money. I think that someone in my situation could easily start to make a drastically different amount of money and say, this is my life now, and get a car payment, higher rent, and be more frivolous with their spending. And if you work for a company and get a raise, that might be okay because unless you lose your job, your paycheck is always predictable. However, for self-employed people, there's no guarantee that it's going to be the same amount every single month in the future. There's that famous quote with investing that goes, "Past performance is no guarantee of future results." And if I started to make all these life changes as I was making more money, and then all of a sudden started to make less, 1, my lifestyle would be harder to sustain, and 2, my savings wouldn't go as far. And so in order to keep the small amount of certainty that I have in my life, I live the same regardless of how much money I'm making. For example, if I make $1,000 one month, I stick to my $2,500 budget. Or if I make $6,500 another month, I stick to my $2,500 budget. Because my income is so variable, I don't want to create this expensive lifestyle that I can no longer sustain and then have to go back to a real job. And instead, I just keep my spending at the exact same level no matter how much money I'm making. And I think if you're self-employed, this helps bring some certainty in your life. And when you do that, you can move on to the fourth step, pay yourself last. Now, what I often preach in this channel is this idea of paying yourself first, which means when you get paid, set aside a specific amount of money to save before you pay your bills. And this concept works well when you can predict how much money you're making. However, in my situation, this is a little bit harder to do. And instead, I pay myself last. Meaning when I get paid, I first pay my bills and then I save the remainder. And the reason I do this is because my income is so variable where one month I can make $1,003 and another month I can make $6,500. And so paying myself last allows me to, one, maximize my savings rate, and two, be covered for low earning months. In my own situation, paying myself last makes the most sense because, for example, if one month I make $6,500, I pay my predictable monthly expenses of $2,500 and then save the rest of $4,000. Because then if I start to make less, say the next month I make $1,500, I can use that savings to cover the difference. Instead of viewing my income as this month-to-month thing, I just average it out over time, where if 2 months I make $2,000, then the next 2 months I make $3,000, and then the next 2 months I make $6,000, then my average monthly income is $3,667. The world of self-employment is very unpredictable, but if you keep your spending rate the exact same regardless of how much money you make and save the remainder, it all evens out. And then it makes things a little bit more predictable. And paying myself last allows me to not view income as a month-to-month thing, but as this average over the course of a year. And once I do that, my final thing I do in order to manage my money is to not stay in the scarcity mindset forever. Now, I'm sure that some people watching this will view my money management system as this scarcity mindset where I'm depriving myself and not enjoying life. And to some extent, you're right, because when you lose all these benefits that come with being an employee to a company, and then you have to figure it out on your own, you have to look at money differently. At least in the beginning, you're forced in this scarcity mindset because you have no clue of how much money you're going to be making. But as you continue, hopefully, your hard work will pay off. Hopefully, as you work hard and put in the hours over a long period of time, what you're doing will start to build up and you'll see the compounding effects of hard work and your income will be more predictable and maybe even higher. I mean, the definition of an entrepreneur is a person who creates a new business, bearing most of the risk and enjoying most of the rewards. You can't get a reward without some risk involved. You can't get a reward without depriving yourself over a long period of time. And I'm sure that many people that are self-employed would agree with me on that. But my final step to managing your money as a self-employed person is to give yourself permission to get out of the scarcity mindset. And I'm not saying that you just go out and start spending a bunch of money on material possessions, but what I'm saying is when you start to do better financially, give yourself permission to walk with more confidence, to not view money as this scarce thing. I always mention in my videos that being frugal is not about being cheap, but it's about being intentional with your money. As long as you manage your money intentionally, you should always be able to sustain your lifestyle. I've been self-employed for a year and a half with this small YouTube channel, and I've been able to sustain my lifestyle with it, and it's an incredible experience where you learn so much. So take risks, be smart about it, and give yourself permission to reap the benefits of your hard work. And that is how I manage my money as a now successfully self-employed person. With that, muchas gracias. Que tenga un buen día. Nos vemos, chicos.